All right, I want to share with you how I put these fans together, because if you bought the file and you want to know how to assemble it, then there's a couple little tricks you need to, have in mind in order to put the blades inside the fan cage, and I'm going to share with you how. It's an easy assembly, but I want to show you how I put the blade inside there. And if you are a Patreon member, you got this file free, then this video is for you also, because it shares the same thing with you, how to put the fan blade inside the fan cage housing and then, glue everything. But what a fun little prop this was, man. I had a good time making this little fan. Look how tiny it is, man. It's like, barely 2 inches tall. It's so awesome. And I think you guys have a great time with the model and the print also. That fan cage is 1 millimeter in diameter, the piping that creates the cage. So it's a really detailed little print. Here was the prototype that I had made. The first print that I did, well, actually, no, I take that back. This is the batch I did after the prototype, where I added an on and off button. I made the fan blade a little bit smaller, and that way you could slide it in between the cage bars here, just like this, and rotate it in. That's the trick right there. You don't have to watch the rest of the video now. All right. So I made the original prototype that I made, the blade was a little bit bigger, and the prototype also didn't have an on and off switch or a hole for a cord. Those are things that I decided I wanted to add later and that I needed to modify later. So the motor housing just fits snug on top like that. Just, it pushes into there. The motor housing goes onto the back like that. I mean, everything just fits together nicely. And that's what I'm doing here, just sort of making sure everything dry fits together and lines up. You can rotate the fan blade back out. It's all good. Rotate it back in. So we've got everything painted up here. I didn't show you the painting because nobody wants to watch me paint. I couldn't decide what color I really wanted to go with. And I know this is inspired by Dick Tracy, so I did sort of a faded yellow. And yellow is my favorite color anyway. So sort of a faded yellow color with an aluminum or a sort of a steel plated metal cage that looks chrome. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take the motor housing, put a little bit of glue on here. Don't go crazy with the glue. You don't want to have drips and runs of glue. It takes just a little bit. Set the motor housing right on top of the hole. And it's going to sit there perfectly because I designed it that way. So it's going to be really easy to put together. You're only probably doing one, so here I'm doing 3. But it's the same process. Put a little bit of glue on there. Now don't get glue inside that hole. You don't want glue inside that motor housing hole yet. That's for later. And then the trick here is just let it sit and dry. Don't rush it. Let these things sit and dry. And you can see here that once they dry, they're secure and strong, and they rest perfectly as they should on the cage housing. They look so cool. Did I say that already? Yeah, I did. But what a fun little prop, man. So once again, I'm just dry fitting things together, making sure that after I've painted this that, everything still fits together, and I'm just kind of examining it. The next thing you want to assemble is get a little dab of glue, and we're going to do the fan blade. Now the trick to the fan blade here is there's a little nub on the back of the fan blade, and it's made to rest over the hole of the, not necessarily go in the hole of the motor housing, but rest over it so that the glue has something. The hole in the motor housing is a little bit smaller than the hole, than the nub, the male nub on the fan blade. So that when you put a little dab of glue on the male nub of the fan blade, then you rotate it into the cage, you can kind of position it over the hole in the motor housing with, something, a pair of tweezers or something like that, and just slide it into position. Once you slide it into position, just let it dry with the motor housing face down, and it's going to rest right in that hole and dry. Nice and easy. It's the way you want it. I tried to design this so that it would be as minimal amount of assembly as possible, and what you did have to assemble would be pretty simple. And so I think I come up with a pretty good way to do this, and still maintaining the ability to paint each piece individually and then assemble it. Like if you printed this, you know, all as one piece or something, then you would lose the ability to paint the fan blade a different color and the cage a different color and so on and so forth. So I wanted to, you know, maintain the you know, individual pieces, but not spend a gob of time having to try to figure out how to assemble this with all kinds of different tricks and hacks. And so I think I come up with a pretty decent way. And once again, if you bought this file, then I appreciate the support. If you're a Patreon member and you got this file for free, I appreciate the support. And for those who bought this file and are not Patreon members, then go check out my Patreon. You'd get this file free and a whole bunch of other files also with photography tutorials and diorama tutorials and 3D printing tips and painting tips. All kinds of cool stuff. I think it's kind of cool. About 6 other people do too. You can be the 7th anyway. And if you're wondering what I painted this with, I just airbrushed with Vallejo pigments on here, black primer, and some model air paints. And look at that, I just poke it right into where the male nub falls into that little recess, and it's already got glue on it. Then you just let it set and dry, and that's it. I mean, it's pretty easy. Beautiful. Let's move on to the next part. If I can get the lid to the glue back on, we'll move on to the next part. And you guessed it, it's more gluing. These are nice and dry and everything's good. The blade is secure. The fan cage is secure. I've got German Shepherd hair secure also, but that's not supposed to be there. Gosh dang that German Shepherd. Anyway, so we're just about there. And the next part is, you guessed it, just a little bit of glue right there on the tip of the cone. That tip of the cone is made just to sort of friction fit inside there, and the glue does the heavy lifting there. And that's really it. It's a pretty simple assembly. And once you do this, I mean, you've assembled it. Yay! But we need to still make the cord, and I also printed the little electrical plug-in that goes into the wall. One of the nice things about the electrical plug-in that goes into the wall is, in the era that they made these, or the time that they made this particular fan that I sort of themed this after, they had a cloth sheet, a cloth casing over the wiring, and so I was able to sort of copy that. But first, before we get to the electrical part, let's dab a little bit of white on the knob here, the on-off switch, just to bring a little decorative contrast out there. You wouldn't have a yellow base, a yellow neck, a yellow motor housing, and a yellow knob. There had to be some separate color in there, otherwise it looks like I was just lazy. So we'll paint all those little knobs up with some Vallejo white. I thought of doing a 3-knob configuration, like a high, medium, low knob, push button style knob, but I decided to go with the single rotating knob because I was lazy. No, just less to paint and less to mess up is the real reason. And you don't even have to weather these. You can leave them just like this. You know, if you're wondering how I got the sort of faded yellow look, what I did was I airbrushed a base black primer on there, and then I watered down a yellow paint in the cup, and I airbrushed a real thin, almost a wash of yellow onto the fan body and motor housing, and it allowed the black to show through. And that's just kind of what I did on there. You could do it different ways, but we put a little brass color on the bolts on the back and the oscillating knob on top. Once again, just for something a bit different. I mean, I probably could have kept those yellow, but I like to go extra and do all kinds of extra steps. And sometimes the steps are cool. Sometimes they were just a waste. In this case, I think they worked out all right. That's how it goes for me. Selecting the right size brush is important here. See, and on the prototype fan, I really like the color of the prototype fan where I just sprayed it with a silver and let the black show through. I really like that color, and I really like the way that looked. I didn't keep it this way for, you know, the ones I'm going to sell on Etsy because I didn't want it to look like, once again, I was just lazy and just painted it all one color. And not only that, but I couldn't, you know, really paint. I mean, I guess I could paint these different colors, but the components of this prototype fan, but initially I glued it all together so that I could make sure everything fit and that it would go together easily. So I wasn't really worried about painting it in the beginning. I just wanted to assemble it, make sure everything fit. And so it worked out really cool. It's a really cool color. I really like it, and I think I may make some more in that color. Time, let it dry. All right, let's do some cordage. Now this cord here is, so I'm going to tell you why I used a string for this. Sometimes when I make cords, I'll use like a beading armature wire, which is like a 0.22 gauge or something, or and then I'll put that through like a black tubing for like necklaces and bracelets. I didn't do that on this because I didn't want the wire that stiff, because if the wire was stiff, then you would actually knock the fan over. So I think by using a string, you keep the sort of organic shape of the cord, and you don't risk knocking the fan over by moving the, you know, the rigid wire cord. And this is what I use, just some hemp natural cord. And it's cool because it comes in different colors, and I was going to use brown, and I did do one in brown and I did the rest in black, but it was just really cool. And I think in keeping with the way some of the 60s and 50s appliance cords were, they had that patterned fabric casing around the electrical wires. And so this is kind of works out like that. Kind of works out kind of cool. I didn't plan on that. It just, you know, sometimes it works out for me. This time it did. I'm cleaning out with a rigid wire the hole just to make sure there's no not uncured, but there's no cured resin in there or really light supports in there. Then I'll dab a tiny bit of Gorilla super glue on there. Once again, you don't want too much. You don't want this all going down the sides and making a mess. Then I'll go ahead and stick the cord in there, or the string, dab a little bit of baking soda on there, and then I'll brush the excess away with the brush. And that baking soda gives it a really hard finish, and you can paint the baking soda crazy glue concoction together. You can paint that, and it takes paint, and it just, you can even sand it if you wanted to. I mean, it's really hard. So once again, we'll just clear out the holes on the remaining, and we'll just repeat the process. Little crazy glue, little baking soda, little piece of string. Makes a nice cord. I'm going with black on this one. And I think these are like $6 or something for the whole thing of different color strings there. And they come in handy for all kinds of different things. Crates and different props that you might need, you know, roped handles for or something like that. And we'll just dab that little bit of glue in there, and same thing. find a place to set that. And we'll do the little electric outlet part now. I don't know what you call that, the plug-in. But I modeled these really cool little tiny plug-ins, man. They're so small, but they're so cool. I mean, you gotta love resin printing, man. I mean, it just will brush away the excess baking soda. You can blow it away. I have an air, sort of an air blaster that I use also. But here we'll just brush it away with a clean, dry brush, so there's no residual baking soda that's visible. Look at that. Like it was meant to be. And if some of the baking soda super glue, you know, is outside of the hole, that's okay. Just paint it. It's not a big deal. Just paint over it in a black or a yellow, and you're good. I'd probably say paint over it in black. That way it looks like there's a grommet coming out of the base of the fan that holds the electrical wire in, which is what you typically see in real life. So if you couldn't tell, I was happy with that. That was really cool. I was really feeling myself right there. So, all right, let's pull out of the isopropyl alcohol these teeny tiny little plug-ins. I printed 4 in case one failed. These things are super tiny. And I modeled a little hole, 2mm hole. So that brings up another point. 2mm hole is what's in the side of the fan body. And a 2mm hole is in this plug end also, so that you can put basically anything you want in there, any cordage or wire you deem appropriate in those holes, as long as it's 2mm or, you know, narrower, which couldn't be much narrower because that's pretty narrow. But being that I used string, it was plenty. Who knows what I did there? Oh, I went to get warm water to remove the supports from these, and look how small they are. How cool. With my fumbly fingers. Normally I would use something like a hemostat to hold these, but that would shatter these. So I'll just use some pliers with really jacked up tips, because I use or tweezers with really jacked up tips, because I use them for all the wrong things as usual. So all the tips get ruined. Little baking soda again. Same way we did the cord coming out of the body. We're going to do the same thing here. A little baking soda and super glue, and we'll get those things attached, and then we can paint them once they're on there. I didn't want to paint them before I attach them to the cord, because then I've got to try to find a way to hold them, and that just doesn't work. So I figured we'd do it after I got them attached to the cord. Now that we've got those attached, go ahead and paint these black. I paint the whole thing black, and then I paint a little bit of brass on the very tips in order to sort of, once again, give you that little added bit of photographic, realism, something for the eye to, gravitate to and catch on to, so it's not just all black. And hey, if you haven't done so already, please check out my Instagram, insightful_imagery, my Facebook, Insightful Imagery also, my Patreon, Insightful Imagery also. All the links will be in the description of this video. My website, where you can buy all kinds of cool props or download digital files, is insightfulimagery.com, where you can check out a cool catalog also of toy photography that I do, using the props that you see me paint here, just like this fan, and all kinds of other cool props like wheelbarrows and medieval carts and barrels and guillotines and all the cool stuff that you want to have interacting with your figures. I make all kinds of cool stuff. Right there in the bottom right of the frame, you see a bunch of little air compressors that I made also. I don't know why they're on the counter right there. They should be put away, but I work in a mess. That's what I do. But hey, here's the final piece. Appreciate you watching. I appreciate you following me to the end. I hope this video helps you on how you can put your fan together, whether you bought the file or you got the file free from Patreon. Take care.